Hi everybody, welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today I want to talk about the Rolex 1908. This was a watch that was unveiled at Watches Wonders Geneva 2023, and this isn't a first thoughts video. Instead, I kind of want to discuss some thoughts around, after seeing this watch, whether I think it can really be successful for Rolex. And I'd also like to know what you all think, especially after hearing my opinions on this. So feel free to comment below what you think about in terms of the 1908 and what it will do or not do for Rolex as a brand. So just very, very quickly, in terms of a summary, this is the dress watch. It's kind of in what I call the Calatrava style. So it's a very simple time-only watch, available in yellow gold or white gold. It's 39 millimeters in diameter, and it's powered by the caliber 7140. So that's an automatic movement, highly accurate 66-hour power reserve. Rolex has played around with dress watches before, not very successfully, in the sense that the Cellini collection, which was also discontinued at Watches and Wonders, never really was what the rest of Rolex was. So a lot of people liked the watches, but they didn't sell particularly well. The prices would fall secondhand versus what they sold for new, which, while that's standard for watches, wasn't something that Rolex has really been familiar with in recent memory. And it just never had the same value retention that their sports watch, or what they call their professional watch line, or even their classic watch line, has experienced. So they seem to be relaunching, moving away from the Cellini name, which makes sense to me. And so here comes this particular watch. The problem that I think that they're going to run into in terms of it being any more successful, or at least significantly more successful than the Cellinis, is the competition that exists in the dress watch space. It's just not the same as the sports watch lineup, where Rolex really is king for all intents and purposes. So I want to compare this watch to the Holy Trinity options that are available in this sort of Calatrava time-only style, and also A. Lange & Söhne, which is the top dress watch brand out of Germany. Now, at the time of this recording, when I checked Audemars Piguet, which is one of the three Swiss brands that's seen as Holy Trinity, their website didn't seem to have sort of a Calatrava style watch. Or they had one that kind of looked that way, but it was a minute repeater. So I've removed them from consideration. So we're going to look at four watches. And in order to try and keep the case style as similar as possible, we're going to do the 18 karat white gold versions of all of these. So in terms of the Rolex, the 1908, as noted, 39 millimeter watch. It's 9.5 millimeters thick, which is thinner than the Cellinis were, is my understanding. Retail price on this particular variant is $23,300. And as noted before, it is an automatic movement. Next up is probably what we would think of as the granddaddy of all of these type of watches. That would be Patek Philippe's Calatrava. This particular reference is a 39 millimeter watch as well. Retails significantly higher at $31,940. We do have secondhand price data from Watch Charts in terms of what an average private sale price would be on this. It'd be a little bit less at $30,160 at the time of this recording. And this is not an automatic movement, it's manual wind. But because of that, the watch is also thinner than the Rolex at just 8.08 millimeters. The other of the Holy Trinity that we have an option for is a Patrimony from Vacheron Constantin. This is actually a very large diameter watch compared to the rest of this set at 42 millimeters. However, it is the thinnest of all of these watches at 7.65 millimeters. It is manual wind only. Retail price at $22,500 with a secondhand market price average of $14,692. And finally, an A. Lange & Söhne Saxonia Automatic. As the name of that would imply, this is an automatic watch, not a manual wind, unlike the Patek and the Vacheron that we're looking at. This is still very thin. It's actually the second thinnest watch that we're looking at 7.8 millimeters. It's a 38.5 millimeter diameter watch, so very similar to the Rolex and the Patek. $27,600 retail with an average secondhand price of $18,442. As all that information sort of shows, I'm not quite sure where Rolex is positioning with all this, but the competition is fairly stiff. All of these watches trade less used than they go for new, though the value retention on the Calatrava is very, very high. That being said, at the price point that Rolex is coming out at, that low $20,000 range, it's right there with the Lange, it's right there with the Patrimony out of Vacheron. And granted, the Vacheron is a hand wind only watch, but you do get a significantly thinner watch in either instance, actually in all instances versus Rolex. And Rolex has made some significant improvements. Now, the accuracy of the Rolex caliber may be higher than any of these other 3 watches that I've presented here. But again, this isn't the sports watch world. When it comes to dress watches, people aren't as obsessed like with COSC certification. It's just not a discussion point that comes up in the same frequency as what we might see when we're talking about dive watches, for example. Of course, your mileage may vary in terms of whatever you might be after, but it's a different world when we get into the world of dress watches. And so, again, if this is supposed to do better than the Cellini line, I'm not quite sure how it succeeds. It looks an awful lot like a Calatrava or a Calatrava derivative. And if you like this particular Rolex configuration more than that, more power to you. But you can see from the information I've shown that, especially if you're willing to consider secondhand, you've got some brands that in the dress watch space are just far more prestigious than Rolex is. And part of that is Rolex has struggled to really gain prestige with its dress watch line. But why would you take this unless you really loved the particular, say, hand configuration more? Why would you take this over a Vacheron Patrimony? Or why would you take this over a Saxonia if you really wanted an automatic, for example? Now, one of the things we might turn to would be movement finishing, and I haven't been able to handle a 1908. I don't know what its movement finishing looks like. It does have a display case back, so I've seen some pictures of it, and it looks nice, but is it nicer than a Calatrava? I don't know. It's almost assuredly not as nice as what Lange does, because Lange is pretty well renowned for doing top-end finishing, even on their most quote-unquote entry-level watches. So, and that's something that they've held up favorably even against Patek with. But with all this said, I just don't really know where this watch ends up fitting in the marketplace. I did hear a rumor, a report, a speculation that Rolex may be planning to use the 1908 as a gateway watch, hey, you need to buy this and then you'll get on the list for other stuff. And as the lower secondhand price points might suggest with the Lange, the Vacheron, and the Patek that I've shown you, that is something that we have heard about with those brands. Like if you want to get some grand complication from Patek, you need to spend money with Patek first, and going in and getting a Calatrava is an option for that. Likewise, if you're wanting, say, a Lange Odysseus, going in and buying a Saxonia to get some buying history is something that I've heard people going and doing. There's one big difference between these 3 brands and Rolex. In the case of the Vacheron and Patek and Lange, all of these dress watches, even though they are quite expensive watches, they are their entry-level watches. They are the cheap way to get in. You would spend less on a Patrimony than you would on an Overseas. You would spend less on a Calatrava than you would on a Grand Complication, and so on. That's not true for Rolex. The 1908 costs more at retail than any of their professional lines in steel at retail. That's a problem, if that's the goal. At least to me it is. I don't see how you can convince people not only do they need to buy a dress watch, they have to spend more to get into Rolex to then spend less to get the watches that they really want. To me, it would have made more sense to just turn out some more Oyster Perpetuals and say you need to buy Oyster Perpetuals before you can be on the list for Submariner. At least then the style of watch would be more similar than asking people to go and buy a precious metal dress watch in order to get steel. If the steel was really expensive out of Rolex, like it is with Vacheron or a Nautilus out of Patek, I'd get it, but it's not. So anyway, that's why I'm not really sure that the 1908 is going to do for Rolex what I think they want it to do. But anyway, comment below if you agree with me or if you have a different perspective. I'd like to hear some other theories on this. And if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. And if you want to be notified when I have new videos out, just click subscribe. Take care, everybody.